Humans have a really strange relationship with cars. We trust them more than we trust people. When a car runs smoothly, we talk about it like we're in a relationship. This car just gets me. But the second something goes wrong, the instinctive reaction is always the same. The car is broken. The manufacturer is shady. Modern technology just can't be trusted. Almost no one ever stops to ask a much simpler question. What if I'm the problem? Ask any mechanic and they'll tell you. They're not afraid of blown engines or failed transmissions. What truly gives them cold sweats is when a customer walks in and says, "I think," because what follows is usually a story that makes you wonder how this person is still legally allowed to drive. And this is one of those stories. Story 1. Cruise control is not autopilot. This guy was driving a massive motorhome, the kind of vehicle that just screams road trips, freedom, and a very relaxed attitude toward eating neatly. One day, he's cruising down the highway. Straight road, perfect weather, no traffic. He sets the cruise control at exactly 60 miles per hour, something millions of Americans do every single day. Everything is fine until a truly dangerous thought pops into his head. If the car can hold its own speed, then it probably drives itself too. With the kind of confidence that only comes from completely misunderstanding technology, he leaves the driver's seat, not to grab a drink, not to adjust the radio. He walks straight to the back to make himself a sandwich. In his mind, it all checks out. The car is going straight. The highway is wide open. Cruise control is on. The only tiny missing detail is, someone actually holding the steering wheel. Story 2. Convertible gets soaked in the rain. This owner was driving a shiny convertible, the kind of car that was clearly made for sunshine, light breezes, and jealous looks in parking lots. The problem was, that day was not sunny or romantic. It was pouring rain. Still, he confidently drove out with the top down, because in his head, he strongly believed his sports car would somehow handle everything. Just a few minutes later, he was drenched, like he had just stepped out of a car. Wash his clothes, clinging to his body. The leather seats flooded, and his ego severely damaged. Instead of closing the roof or asking himself why he did this, he went back to the dealership and demanded a refund. His explanation was delivered very seriously. This car does not have aerodynamic shielding. According to his logic, if the car went fast enough, the wind would blow all the rain over the driver's head, just like in movie chase scenes. Story 3. Drilling holes in the car floor to drain water. This owner was a real hunter, the type used to mud forests and boots that were always soaked. One day, after a long hunt, he looked down at his car floor full of dirty water and came up with an idea that sounded very smart in his head. Instead of drying it out or taking his boots off outside, he decided to drill a few small holes right through the floor so the water could drain out on its own. According to his logic, water goes in. Water should go out extremely efficient. Everything seemed fine until the next time he drove through a large puddle on a dirt road. Within seconds, the water not only failed to disappear, but sprayed back up from under the floor, flooding the cabin even faster than before. The pickup truck suddenly turned into a light-duty submarine, and the owner sat inside, watching the water rise with a confused expression. When the mechanic checked it, they just shook their heads and explained a brutal truth. Story 4. Calling the police because the engine is missing. This guy had just bought a brand new Porsche, so shiny you could use it as a mirror and somehow look richer than usual. He was driving on the highway when suddenly the car stopped dramatically. The kind of stop where your life flashes before your eyes. He panicked, pulled over to the shoulder, and turned on the hazard lights like a Hollywood movie. The first thing to do, according to the instincts of someone who does not really know cars, was to open the hood. And then he froze. Empty. No engine, no machinery. Nothing to prove this had ever been a car. Sweat poured down his heart, pounding like a drum. In his head, there was only one logical conclusion. Someone had stolen his engine in broad daylight, He immediately called the police, his voice full of righteous outrage like a true victim. The police arrived calm, not panicking, not rushing to take notes. One officer quietly walked to the back of the car and opened the trunk. The engine was right there, perfectly calm, almost mocking him. Turns out Porsche has the engine in the back. In that moment, he realized buying an expensive car does not mean you understand what you are driving. Story 5. Trusting GPS? Absolutely. This guy trusted GPS, the way people trust their mothers, never argues, never questions. Whatever GPS says he does. One nice evening, he was driving through the city, the screen glowing with authority. Suddenly GPS said, "Turn right in 20 meters." He looked up. In front of him was water, a calm river reflecting city lights like a travel postcard. His brain hesitated for half a second, but GPS repeated, "Turn right." So he turned. Result: the car went from transportation to amateur submarine. Another time GPS said, "Turn right." In front of him was a pedestrian staircase inside a shopping mall. He still turned because machines are never wrong. The car got stuck halfway up the stairs. Pedestrians clapped like they were watching a street performance. When asked why he did not trust his own eyes, he answered very confidently, "I just follow technology." The most painful twist in the modern age, human eyes lose to a touchscreen. Story 6. The car is haunted. This guy had been driving his car for a few days when he started hearing a strange sound. Click, click, click. It happened very regularly, like someone tapping their fingernails directly into his brain. The scary part was, it only happened when he turned. Going straight. Silence. Turn left. Click. Click. Turn right. Click. Click. His mind went wild. Was the car haunted? Was there a restless spirit from a traffic accident? Did this car once belong to a wizard? He drove with goosebumps, eyes checking the mirrors like a low-budget horror movie. Eventually, he took the car to a mechanic and explained very seriously, "My car is making supernatural sounds with a pattern, like it is trying to communicate." The mechanic sat in the car, turned the key, made one turn, then turned off the turn signal. Total silence. The owner froze. Turns out the scariest haunting of all was never knowing what a turn signal sounds like. Story 7. Driving with a burning anchor. This guy drove out and immediately felt something was wrong. The car felt weak, like it was on a diet. He pressed the gas, and the response was slow, like a Monday morning. After a while, a burning smell started rising, the kind of smell that says, something is sacrificing itself for you. A normal person would stop. He did not. He calmed himself down. The car is probably just tired. Drive a bit more and it will adjust. So he kept driving. 5 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles. Driving and wondering why the car felt like it was dragging an angry elephant. When the burning smell got strong enough to grill meat, he finally pulled into a garage. The mechanic needed 1 second to find the problem. The parking brake was not fully released. It had been halfway up the entire trip. The mechanic looked at him. He looked at the mechanic. Both stayed silent. Turns out he was not driving a car. He was dragging a burning anchor and proudly made it 20 miles. Story 8. Culture shock called manual transmission. An American tourist rented a car in Europe and walked into the parking lot with the confidence of someone who had been driving for 20 years in America. He opened the door, sat in the driver's seat, then froze. In front of him was an unfamiliar gear stick, and even worse, a third pedal. 3-0, 2-3. He looked down, looked up, then looked again as if the pedal would disappear if stared at. Long enough, this car is missing parts, he concluded. Because obviously, normal cars only need gas and brake. The extra pedal must be a manufacturing defect. He called roadside assistance with the voice of a responsible citizen. "My car is broken. There is an extra pedal with no clear function." On the other end of the line, the silence lasted unusually long. When the staff arrived and explained it was a manual transmission, he listened like he was being introduced to ancient technology like the wheel or fire. The real cultural shock was not language or food, it was manual transmission. Story 9. The Case of the Gummy Bear in the Dome Light. One hot afternoon, the car owner noticed something dripping from the ceiling onto the seat. A thick, red sticky substance slowly dripping, like something out of a low-budget horror movie. His brain immediately went into panic mode. Blood. Did this car have a dark past? Was this a sign of some ancient automotive curse? He tried wiping it. It was sticky, very sticky and sweet, which somehow made it worse. He stared up at the ceiling like it was about to confess a crime. Eventually, he took the car in for inspection mentally, preparing for the worst news and the biggest bill. The mechanic opened the dome. Light looked inside and started laughing. The culprit was revealed. One gummy bear sacrificed for science. A child had stuffed candy into the dome light, and the heat inside the car turned it into a waterfall of melted sugar. The painful conclusion. The car was not cursed. It was attacked by gummy candy and child curiosity. Story 10. The Mysterious Chocolate Leak. One winter morning, the car owner turned the seat heater up to the highest setting, enjoying the luxury of being warmed from behind. 5 minutes later, he started smelling something strange. Not exactly burning, but the smell of childhood. He looked down and saw a shiny brown streak spreading across the seat like alien technology waste. His brain immediately jumped to a serious conclusion. My car seat is leaking chemicals. He panicked, turned off the heater, and opened the car door like he was escaping a toxic scene. In his mind, he was already calling the car company, filing lawsuits, and going on TV to tell his tragic story. After a few minutes, he calmed down, checked his pocket, and discovered a bitter truth. A forgotten chocolate bar had melted perfectly slow, cooked by the heated seat. No conspiracy, no technical failure, just chocolate high heat, and a man learning for the first time that seat heaters do not care if you are human or candy. Or Story 11. Pancakes, maple syrup, and the steering wheel. One rushed morning on the way to work. This guy was driving while eating pancakes, like a true multitasking American citizen. One hand on the steering wheel, the other holding breakfast covered in maple syrup because life should be sweet. He arrived, got out of the car, like nothing happened. The next morning he came back, put his hand on the steering wheel, and panicked. It was sticky. Very sticky. The kind of sticky that makes you wonder if your skin is melting. He wiped his hand on his pants on the seat and stared at the steering wheel suspiciously. Is the plastic decomposing? Is my car about to self-destruct? In his head, he was already seeing recalls, lawyers, and long emails written in all caps. He took the car to a garage with a serious face. The mechanic looked at the steering wheel, smelled it lightly, then wiped it once. Maple syrup, he said casually. Turns out yesterday he had been driving while eating pancakes, and the steering wheel was just holding on to breakfast memories. Conclusion: his skin was not melting. Breakfast just came back to say hello. Story 12. The ham sandwich in the air conditioning system. One day, the car owner turned on the air conditioning and was immediately attacked by a horrifying stench. The kind of smell that makes you question whether the laws of biology have just been offended. It was not mildly unpleasant. It was something has died and left no will. He immediately concluded there was a dead mouse in the car. His brain ran faster than the engine, imagining an entire family of rodents choosing his car's air conditioning as their final resting place. He took the car to the garage with a mournful expression. The mechanic removed the air filter, checked the vents, and frowned seriously, like he was working a crime scene. Then, the culprit appeared. Not a mouse, not any furry creature. It was a ham sandwich covered in green and white mold, forgotten in the car for weeks, and faithfully distributed by the air conditioning system every day. The owner stood in silence. Turns out the car was not cursed. It was just broadcasting an expired lunch. Story 13. The noisy gas tank. This guy is driving when he suddenly hears a strange sound. Turn left, slosh, turn right, slosh. A soft, glug-glug sound, but enough to make his heart start dancing. His brain instantly flashes a red alert. This is not good. The gas tank is making noise. Because obviously in panic logic, if fuel is sloshing, the car is about to explode. He keeps driving in extreme stress mode, taking every turn, like he is carrying a ticking time bomb. Every curve feels like an episode of a documentary about an incoming mechanical disaster. Eventually, he cannot handle it anymore, pulls over and crawls down to check. His face is serious, like a NASA chief engineer. And then, the culprit reveals itself. A plastic water bottle rolling around under the seat, full of water and full of attitude. It does not care about his panic. It is just doing its job, rolling around and creating sound effects. He stands up and lets out a dry laugh. Turns out the car has no problem at all. It was just a water bottle, absolutely nailing its role as the noisy gas tank. Story 14. The car door would not close because the seatbelt was stuck. A small tragedy, but extremely dramatic. I figured the most American solution was to slam the door really hard, like in action movies where the hero does not think, just acts. So I slammed it. Nothing. I slammed it harder, like the door owed me rent money. The seatbelt stayed smug, jammed in place like a New Year's weight loss promise. I checked again, pulled it out, stuffed it back in, talked to it politely, even threatened to take it to traffic court. No effect. I kept slamming the door. Neighbors were watching me like I was auditioning for the lead role in Fast and Furious Parking Lot Edition. After a few weeks, I realized I was systematically, scientifically, and passionately destroying my own car. The paint was scratched, the door was groaning, and the seatbelt stayed calm, like an office worker on a Monday morning. In the end, I learned a very American lesson. When you face a small problem, do not make it bigger with your fists. Calm down. Pull the seatbelt out. Close the door gently. Then laugh at your own very human stupidity. Story 15. A bird built a nest inside my car horn. Sounds like a joke, until I pressed the horn and it wheezed like it had just finished 3 laps around a soccer field. The sound was not beep beep, but more like very unsure of itself, like the horn was apologizing for bothering anyone. I figured the car had caught a cold, or the horn was going through a midlife crisis. So I popped the hood to check, expecting to find a loose wire or a traitorous screw. Instead, I discovered a full bird nest, straw, feathers, a strong sense of warm family vibes. Turns out my car horn had been naturally soundproofed by a very hard-working and creative bird couple. The horn wanted to be loud, but was forced to live gently, mindfully, in a state of automotive meditation. I stood there, laughing, while also feeling like I had invaded bird real estate. In the end, I learned that my car is not just a vehicle. It is an eco-friendly apartment complex, where the car horn has to step aside for nature and some very unexpected peace. Story 16. Valet mode turns a supercar into a lawnmower. One morning, I got into my sports car with full action movie confidence. I stepped on the gas, waiting for a powerful roar, but the car just crawled forward like it was out for a casual stroll. Weak acceleration, gentle response, the driving feel of a battery-powered lawnmower on its last breath. My heart hit the floor. I started worrying about engine failure, imagining a mechanic shaking his head and a repair bill longer than a lease contract. I listened to every sound. Each noise felt like a personal financial goodbye. I drove slowly, face tense, head full of very American disaster scenarios. I pulled over, opened my phone, and started Googling symptoms like an amateur Google doctor. Then I saw it, a tiny but terrifying icon. The car was still in valet mode from the last time I handed over the keys. I turned it off with one button. Instantly, the supercar woke up. Confident roar, aggressive acceleration, straight out of a commercial. I sat there laughing to myself, relieved like I had just been cleared of a crime I did not commit. Story 17. 3 floor mats stacked, no acceleration. One morning, I drove out, feeling like everything was fine, until the car absolutely refused to speed up. I pressed the gas harder. The car responded with cold indifference, like it was practicing meditation. I started worrying. Engine, transmission, my bank account trembling in the distance. I tried pressing again. My foot went down, but the car showed zero interest. Finally, I looked down and discovered the accelerator was blocked by a soft, architectural project. 3 floor mats stacked on top of each other, each from a different era of the car's life, teaming up against speed. One mat came with the car. One was a promotional freebie. One was just to keep things clean. They sat there, confident, thick, and completely irresponsible. I pulled them out like dismantling a multi-layer sandwich, and the car immediately accelerated normally, making me laugh alone in my very small car. Story 18. Auto start-stop. Thought the car had stalled. The first time my car shut off at a red light, my heart shut off with it. I was sitting in the middle of the intersection, the red light hanging there, the engine silent like it was holding a grudge. In my head, I pictured the whole scene. The car stalled, the driver behind me laying on the horn, me pretending to be busy on a phone call. I panicked, twisted the key, hit the gas, stared at the dashboard like I was playing a life-or-death puzzle game. The car stayed quiet, calm, very zen and extremely confident. I started sweating, imagining the roadside assistance call, the repair bill, and the mechanic's look of pity. Just as I was about to accept my fate, the light turned green. I lifted my foot off the brake, and the car came back to life instantly. Clean, smooth, full of energy. Turns out it was auto start-stop, a smart fuel-saving feature with a serious lack of emotional warning. The car thought it was saving the environment. I thought my life had just entered a new chapter. I laughed in relief and learned a driving lesson. Story 19. Lane keep assist. Thought the car was possessed. The first time the steering wheel suddenly jerked to the side while I was driving, I almost screamed like I was in a horror movie. The wheel vibrated lightly but decisively, like some invisible force was fighting me for control. I looked around, checked the mirrors, glanced at the back seat. I even briefly wondered if my car had developed its own soul. No one there. Just me, a straight road, and some very American fear. The steering wheel kept tugging. The car refused to listen, like it was trying to teach me discipline. My heart raced. My palms got sweaty. My brain jumped straight to possession, software failure, or a full-on car rebellion. I gripped the wheel tighter, determined to prove that humans were still in charge. Then I realized it. I was drifting out of my lane without using my turn signal. Very naturally. Very wrong. Turns out lane keep assist was trying to save my life. Gentle, but firm. The car was not possessed. It was just doing its job. I turned on the signal. The car behaved again. I silently apologized and learned a lesson in modern driving. Story 20. Backup camera blurry because of mud. One morning I shifted into reverse, and the screen turned a muddy brown, like an iced milk coffee left out overnight. I squinted at it, wondering if I was backing up or watching a desert documentary. The image was shaky, blurry, very artistic, and completely unsafe. I immediately concluded the backup camera was broken. Probably technology. Probably fate. Possibly because I had washed the car yesterday. I started thinking about replacing the camera, imagining a bill brighter than the screen itself. I complained to friends, mentally preparing my explanation to the mechanic. It just stopped working. Before calling to make an appointment, I stepped out of the car and took a look. The backup camera was completely splattered with mud, like it had just gone on an off-road adventure through the wilderness. I wiped it once with a cloth. The screen, instantly became clear. Sharp. Almost painfully clear. I stood there laughing to myself and learned a very simple American lesson. Before replacing expensive technology, try wiping it first. Story 21. Thought the camera lines were scratches. The first time I turned on the backup camera, I saw colored lines appear on the screen, and my heart immediately went into free fall. In my head, those were clearly long, sharp scratches. Very intentional ones. I imagined someone keying the camera lens with deep life frustration. I was angry, offended, and mentally preparing to replace the glass like a responsible adult. I complained to friends, telling the story with the tone of a modern technology victim. I even crouched behind the car and inspected it closely, but there were no scratches in real life, which somehow made everything worse. I turned the camera on and off multiple times. The lines stayed. Persistent. Provocative. I started questioning the universe. Finally, in a rare moment of maturity, I opened the owner's manual. Turns out those were the backup guidelines, designed to help with distance and avoid collisions. I stood there for a few seconds, laughing awkwardly, realizing I almost replaced the glass because of pure ignorance. Very American lesson learned. Sometimes technology is not broken. The user is just a little dramatic. Story 22. Blamed the sound system for my own music. I turned on the music in my car expecting a premium audio experience. But what came out sounded terrible and deeply betrayed me. I shook my head, sighed, and started silently cursing the expensive sound system like it had personally insulted my dignity. The bass was weak. The rhythm was off. The vocals sounded like they were punishing an innocent driver. I blamed the car, the brand, modern technology that promised too much and delivered too little. I even considered swapping speakers, upgrading the amp, and writing a savage review in my head while sitting in traffic. I adjusted the EQ, turned the volume up and down, but the music stayed bad. Persistently, stubbornly, confidently bad. Right as my anger peaked, I glanced at the center screen with deep suspicion. The music was coming from my phone, my playlist. Songs I had personally curated and once proudly shared with friends. Story 23. Forgot to remove the protective plastic from the wiper blades. On the first rainy day after replacing the wipers, I turned them on with absolute confidence. Immediately, a screeching sound filled the car, like fingernails on a chalkboard. I winced, shivered, and felt like the windshield was crying for help. Every wipe was a painful scrape against the glass, sounding like I was sanding the windshield down to resell it. I started panicking, thinking the glass was about to get scratched, money was about to disappear, and my financial destiny was laughing at me. I turned the wipers off, then back on, hoping for a miracle. No miracle. Just a more confident screech. I got out to check, wearing the face of a doctor who had misdiagnosed the patient. And then I saw it. The protective plastic was still perfectly intact on the wiper blades, shiny, innocent. I stood there for a few seconds, removed the plastic, turned the wipers back on, and everything was smooth, straight out of a commercial. I laughed to myself in the rain and learned a very American lesson. Before blaming the car, blame yourself first. Story 24. Air conditioner water. Thought it was a chemical leak. On a hot day, I parked my car and saw water dripping underneath like the car was quietly crying. The drops fell steadily, very seriously, enough to activate my worst imagination. I bent down to look, heart racing, mind jumping straight to chemical leaks, system failure, and terrifying repair bills. I sniffed the air like a self-appointed expert, trying to detect danger. I even imagined a mechanic slowly shaking his head. I panicked and called friends, describing the situation in full disaster movie voice. Before calling roadside assistance, I made a rare, reasonable decision and Googled it. Within seconds, I discovered it was just condensation from the air conditioner. Completely normal, completely harmless. The car was fine. My wallet was too. I stood there smiling in relief, watching the water keep dripping innocently. Very American lesson learned. Sometimes the car is not having a serious problem. It is just cooling you down and sweating on your behalf. Story 25. Oil warning light. Thought it was a magic lamp. One beautiful day, the oil warning light came on, and I looked at it like it was a lucky star. I figured the car was just giving me a gentle reminder, like, whenever you have time, maybe think about me. Days passed. Weeks passed. The light stayed on. Steady, loyal, more reliable than an alarm clock. I started believing in miracles. Maybe if I ignored it long enough, it would turn itself off, just like adult problems. I drove with a vague confidence that the engine understood I was busy. The car started making strange noises, vibrating slightly, but I chose positivity and turned the music up louder. Then, one morning, the car would not start. The engine was dead. Completely. No negotiations. The mechanic looked at me, then looked at the oil warning light, then looked back at me. For a long time. That was when I learned a painful American lesson. Warning lights are not magic lamps, and miracles rarely come from ignoring reality. Story 26. Loose gas cap. Called roadside assistance. One peaceful evening, the check engine light suddenly came on and instantly ruined my mood. I stared at it like I was facing a lifelong enemy. In my head, disaster scenarios lined up, bad sensors, an engine preparing a farewell ceremony. I panicked, pulled over, and called roadside assistance with a voice that was both very professional and very desperate. When the truck arrived, the mechanic looked at the dashboard, nodded mysteriously, then walked to the back of the car. He opened the gas cap and gave it a gentle twist until it made a very humble click. The light was still on, but my embarrassment had fully turned on. He told me to drive for a bit, and the light would turn off on its own. I nodded, laughed it off, and paid for a real-world lesson. Very American lesson learned. Before calling roadside assistance, check the gas cap, because sometimes the check engine light is just asking you to tighten it a little more. Story 27. Could not turn off the car because it was not in P. I parked the car, pressed the engine stop button, and waited for the peaceful end of the journey. Nothing happened. I pressed it again, harder, like the car needed to be convinced through psychological pressure. The engine kept running, steady, confident, calm, like it was quietly laughing at me. I started panicking, thinking the button was broken, the software had glitched, or the car had decided to work overtime. I tried everything. Fast presses, slow presses, pressing with threatening eye contact, and silent begging in my head. The car refused to shut off, cold, firm, as strict as a math teacher. I looked around, checked the dashboard, and finally noticed the gear selector was not in park. The car was protecting me from myself, refusing to turn off until it was safe. I shifted into P, pressed the button again, and the car shut off instantly. Smooth, obedient, like it had never resisted. I sat there for a few seconds, both embarrassed and impressed. The car was smarter than the driver, and I understood. Story 28. Inflated the tire to 100 psi because I thought it meant 100%. I pulled into a gas station feeling very tech-savvy and very confident. The screen showed a PSI number. I saw 100 and immediately thought percentage, like charging a phone battery. In my mind, 100% is always the best, full, complete, successful. I kept pumping with the determination of someone fully committed to the wrong logic. The tire kept inflating, looking strong, healthy, full of energy, like it had just come back from the gym. I nodded in approval, feeling like I had just performed professional-level car care. Then a loud bang. Sharp, final, highly educational. I froze, heart racing, staring at the tire, now flat and sad, like a deflated balloon. People around me turned to look. I pretended to stay calm, like this sort of thing happens every day. Turns out I was not charging a battery. I was running a destruction experiment. Very American lesson learned. PSI is not a percentage, and tires do not like being loved too much. Story 29. Did not know the sun visor could swing sideways. For years of driving, I quietly accepted getting blasted in the face by sunlight as an unavoidable part of adult life. Every afternoon, the sun came in from the side and hit my eyes with laser-like accuracy. I responded by squinting, tilting my head, leaning my body, and driving like I was playing hide-and-seek with the sun. I was fully convinced the sun visor had exactly one job: block the front. End of story. When the sun came from the side, I treated it as a test of mental strength and eyesight. I drove like a desert warrior, one hand shielding my eyes, one hand on the wheel. Extremely dangerous, extremely committed. Then one day, by pure accident, I pulled the visor to the side and it swung sideways. Smooth, natural, deeply betraying. The sunlight disappeared instantly. I froze, feeling like I had just discovered a national secret. Turns out the visor could swing sideways. It always could. Shasti. Story 30. Driving at night without turning on the headlights. One night, I drove with full confidence because the dashboard was glowing like a Christmas tree. Everything was visible. The gauges looked great. The screen was shiny. So I was absolutely convinced the headlights were on. I cruised through the night with the fake sense of safety of someone who does not understand technology. The car behind me started keeping a strange distance. No passing, no honking, just quietly following, like they were watching a horror movie. I thought it was a little weird, but reassured myself that my driving was perfect. Then I looked ahead and realized the road was darker than usual. A very intentional kind of dark. That was when it hit me. I was driving at night without my headlights on. The bright dashboard had fooled me, and my car had turned into a moving ghost vehicle. I turned the lights on. The whole world lit up. The car behind me immediately sighed in relief by passing me. I laughed awkwardly in the car and learned a very American lesson. Just because it is bright on the inside does not mean you are shining on the outside. Story 31. Rearview mirror went blind. One evening driving home, I suddenly noticed my rearview mirror was completely dark, like it had decided to quit its job. I stared at it, tilted my head, changed positions, then wiped it with my sleeve like I was fixing an old TV. Nothing behind me. Total darkness. Other cars disappeared. I started to panic. I thought the mirror was broken. Technology had turned on me. Or the car was testing my mental strength. I kept driving in full tension, constantly turning my head like a trainee owl. Just as my neck was about to file a complaint, my hand accidentally touched a small tab under the mirror. I flicked it lightly. Everything lit up. The car behind me appeared clearly, innocent, completely normal. Turns out it was the anti-glare tab, designed to protect my eyes, not destroy my confidence. I sat there for a few seconds, both embarrassed and grateful toward the mirror. Outro. And that brings us to the end of 31 stories. 31 moments where I blamed the car, the technology, or fate, while the real problem was always sitting right behind the wheel. The car is not stupid. The car is just doing its job. The driver is the software that has not been updated. These stories are not meant to lecture anyone, just to remind us that everyone has been confidently clueless at least once. If you laughed, nodded, or saw yourself in any of these moments, congratulations. You are completely normal. Now it is your turn. Comment which story was the most ridiculous, or share your own legendary moment, so we can laugh together and drive a little smarter every day.